Imagine a coding partner who not only completes your thoughts, but anticipates your next move. That's Windsurf, the world's first truly agentic code editor that doesn't just assist you, it flows with you. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, and today we're taking our first look at Windsurf. Now, if you want to get started with it, I have a link in the description below. This is a referral code for me. Doesn't cost you anything extra, but does give me some free credits. So if you want to help out the channel, please go ahead and use that link. Now, I'm excited about this. There are a lot of really great AI coding tools out on the market. A bunch of them serve a bunch of different purposes, which we'll talk through today. And this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to use it to create a new Spring app in Java and see what it can do for us today and take a look at some of the features. This won't be exhaustive. This is really kind of a first look. And I'm just out here comparing some of these tools and giving you my thoughts on those. All right, I think a really good place to start is to talk about some of the evolution of these tools, picking the right tool for the right job. So we start out with these standalone chatbot assistants. These are things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic Claude. We've gone over to these chatbots. We've given it some kind of prompt, as much information as possible. And at the other end of that, we get some code. Now we need to take that code and put it into our IDEs, our text editors, our development environment. So that is a very back and forth kind of manual process, right? Then we came along to these inline IDE assistants, and these work directly in our development environments. They provide real-time code suggestions and completions within your editor, often augmented by an IDE chat or documentation feature. The developer remains in control with the AI acting as a pair programmer embedded in the coding workflow. And these are tools like GitHub Copilot, JetBrains AI Assistant, or Amazon Code Whisperer. And then we come to the agentic AI IDE environments, and these are really cutting edge. This is where the AI acts as a proactive partner that can manage multi-step coding tasks autonomously. These are specialized IDEs or add-ons where an assistant doesn't just wait for your prompt, it takes initiative to suggest, refactor, and coordinated changes across your code base. The interaction often feels like delegating work to a smart junior developer. You tell it what you want, and it figures out the steps how to get there, keeping you in the loop. And this is tools like Cursor and Windsurf and Junie. And I did an introduction to JetBrains Junie. I'll leave a link to that tutorial in the description below if you want to go ahead and check that out. So that's kind of the evolution of where we've kind of gone with some of these coding assistants, these AI assistants, and where we are. But again, we're going to focus on Windsurf today, but all of these are really great tools to add to your tool belt. All right, so you can head over to windsurf.com and learn a little bit more about it. Now, recently, they've updated their pricing. That's one thing that I'm really excited about because their pricing was a little bit different than something like Cursor. And even though it was kind of cheaper at the beginning, once you started like using it a lot, it became a little bit more expensive and you had to bump up into some different tiers. Now I think it's much more streamlined with other products like Cursor. So this is pretty exciting. So go ahead and check this out. Another big rumor floating around now is that OpenAI has kind of floated this out. Actually, I don't know who floated it out there, but there's some news going around that OpenAI is interested in purchasing Windsor for something like $3 billion. So that could be some exciting news. So stay tuned on that front. But we're going to take a look at Windsurf, and this is a really good place to start. So head over to windsurf.com. Now, you could go into some of these editors and say like start a new project from complete scratch, right? This works well for like programming languages like Java or Python, whatever. I find that when I'm using something like Spring already has a way to kind of bootstrap me a project and give me exactly what I need. So I'm going to kind of bootstrap that project from the Spring initializer. So I'm going to head over here. I'm going to say dev.danvega. And we're just going to call this users. And all I'm going to grab from this is the web. And I think that's all we really need to get started. So I will go ahead and generate this. This will download a zip file. You can open it up in whatever IDE you want, but today we're opening it up in Windsurf so that we can kind of play with Windsurf and take a look at some of the features. With that, actually, before we get to that, I want to take a look at this because this is what we are going to use to create our application. So they have a bunch of JSON placeholder service has a bunch of different endpoints that you can hit. So there's a REST API and I can grab a bunch of information. So this is what I want to model this after. This user is interesting because in this user data, we have address, we have geo within inside of address. We have a company in here, and I want to see if I can come kind of model out all these different domain objects for us. So we'll go ahead and copy this and we'll use this later. But with that, I think we have everything we need. So let's head over to Windsurf, and we won't write some code. We'll let Windsurf write some code for us. All right, so here I am in Windsurf. This is based on Visual Studio Code. So if you've used Visual Studio Code before, this should look pretty familiar. When we hit this kind of main screen here, we're going to be given some workspaces. Here are some previous ones that I've been working on. Now, I will say this is really kind of a first look for me, first, second, third look. I haven't used this a ton, but I've used it enough just to get familiar with it so I can kind of show it off to you. So in here, we're going to go ahead and open up a folder. I'm going to go to dev, Windsurf, and that users project that we just kind of created. And so we're given a pretty familiar environment here. We have our navigator on the left. We have our main editor in the middle. And then on the right, we have this thing called Cascade. And this is the agent that is going to help us write code. So if we look in here, we have a normal Spring Boot project. I have this users application. Nothing really started but the kind of boilerplate code that we need to get up and running. So here's where we're going to start to get going. So under here, right with Cascade, this is where you enter your prompts. And you can do that with Command L if you want to bring that up. We're in the write mode. So we're asking Cascade to be able to make changes to our code. There is a chat mode. If you wanted to kind of just get familiar with the code base, you could start to ask questions about it. And again, that's the really kind of power here, as opposed to using something like ChatGPT. It has the context of our entire project already. So if we had an established project, one that we were already working on, and we had some conventions, and we said, write a CRUD REST API similar to the one we created for to-dos or some other domain, it would use that as context and kind of write similar code to that, which is really nice. Here's what I really like. We can come in here and we can select the model that we want to use. Again, I'm on a paid version. You should be able to get started for free. Even right now as we speak, GPT 4.1 came out and they are offering that for free, so you can use that. But you get your pick of model. And I really like this because different models work better or for different reasons or for different projects. So that's nice that you can go ahead and pick your model. I'm going to stick with GPT 4.1. I found it to be really good with coding, so I'm going to use that. You can go ahead and bring in images. You can also use this to kind of bring in some more information, like, hey, bring in this web URL as kind of context, or bring in these docs as context, which I find really helps out. And then it also has MCP integration. So if you wanted to bring in some kind of MCP server to like integrate with GitHub, or with, for me, my newsletter on Beehive, or anything that has an MCP server, you can go ahead and configure that here, which is really nice. Then we have our past conversations. We have some other things down here like our Windsurf settings, which we'll get into. But I think a good place to start is to just go ahead and see if we can write some code. So what I want to do is write a CRUD REST API that retrieves data from that JSON placeholder service. So let's say write a CRUD REST API that retrieves data from JSON placeholder service, the user's endpoint, which you can find here. So it does have the capability to like bring in tools. It has like all these tools underneath the hood that it can use, one of which is kind of searching the web. So I'll give it an exact link that it can go ahead and search. And I don't have that, so let's go back and grab this here and then paste that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it is going to go off and do its thing. So it comes up with a plan. It says, hey, to create a REST API in Java, here are the steps that I'm going to need to do. Here's an outline. So here's the user application, a user.java, a controller, a service, some properties. Okay, it's off and running. Would you like, oh, I was in the chat version, so we actually want to be in the right version. So let's just go ahead and say, yes, please create that code. If I was in the right version, it wouldn't have done that. But again, depending on what you're trying to do, those are the two different modes that you can have. So then you'll start to see some things happening on the right. So it says analyze. Now it's creating a user.java. We can see once that's done, it'll be over there. Then you can see the diff for everything that's happening. So I created user.java. Here you can accept or reject these, or at the end of this, I can just say accept all, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. We can see under model, we have this user.java, and it's kind of modeled it pretty good. Username, email, it has an address. Under address, there was a geo, there's a company, and then a company. So it is going to go through and create all of the different types that we need for this to happen, which is really nice. I hope it does it, by the way. So then we go in here, there's a controller happening. There's config for the REST template. This is looking good. Yeah, and then you can go down here and accept all. So let's kind of close this up. What happened with our model? Okay, so it created a static class inside of here. So these work. Again, we have a user type here that is modeling our user. Now, what I will say, and I said the same thing in the kind of Junie intro, is that this is a good starter. But at some point, when you're using these AI coding tools, you'll want it to conform to your style, the way that you like to write things. And so for me, I would actually prefer this user class to be a record, and I would rather have like separate records for both the user and the address and the company and etc. So I'm going to ask it to rewrite this, but there is a feature in here that once you start using this, you'll want to take advantage of. So if you go into here, there are these memories and rules. And if we go ahead and manage these, you can add global rules or you can add workspace rules. So these are, hey, anytime we come across this, this is what I want to do. So for something like Spring, and I want it to have some Spring specific rules, I might add some global rules. You can also come in here and make sure that they are in this project. So if somebody else checks in this project, then and they go ahead and try to generate some code, it uses these rules. So all this does is write a Windsurf rules file. And now you can put anything in here. I often go off to something like ChatGPT or Claude and help me generate this file. Here are the things that I want to create. And in fact, I did this in the Junie video. I'm not going to do that now, but we could create a whole bunch of rules like when you are creating types in Java, please favor mutability and use records. Another one is we're using the REST template here. I'd rather use the REST client. So those are the types of things that you can do inside of whether it's Cursor or Windsurf or Junie. You can kind of create these guidelines to adhere to your kind of coding standards. But I'm going to go ahead and say, let's just ask it to redo this. So please rewrite the user class to use Java records, right? So I want to use Java records here. I don't want to use this class. That's just my preference. All right, and you see that was pretty quick. I'm going to accept these changes. I have a record for user, and inside this record, because I'm not going to be using these outside of this, I find this okay. We have an address, we have a geo, and we have a company. So really quick, doesn't really come across in the video, but man, I find it very fast making these edits and changes, especially when compared to other tools out there. I really like this. Now, as I said, we're using a REST template here. I'd rather use a REST client, so please favor the REST client over the REST template when making HTTP calls, right? So again, this is, I talk about this a lot, but when we're using these AI coding tools, you have to remember that you are the pilot, not the passenger. You are in control here. So if it does something, don't just blindly accept it, learn from it, find out what kind of code it's writing, use it as a learning tool. A lot of times, like when it's writing stuff, I will go through and look to see, okay, why did it write that? Why did it do it that way? Let me learn from this kind of scenario. So I like using this as a learning tool and not just blindly accepting everything that it's going to create for me. So it has a REST template config, but now it has a REST client config. And even now, it looks like it's fumbling on this a little bit. It's creating a web client, not a REST client. So we'll see if we can't figure this out. It's doing a dependency tree, maybe looking, going, oh, we don't have the web client. Spring Boot 3.2, Spring Framework 6 dot something introduced the REST client, and I would rather use that. We're not in a web flux or a reactive stack. I don't want to use the web client, so hopefully it can figure this out. It looks like by looking at that dependency tree, that's what it's doing. Now this is, let's go ahead and accept this. This is where I find one of the things that is not working for me well in Windsurf. When it has to run when it has to run a command, there's ways that you can kind of tune this. And when you want it to allow to run commands, there's this auto run. So we have this user deny list in the settings. And what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, how do we want to allow terminal executions? So we say off, never run those. Like I want to be very careful about those. The other thing to remember here is this is sandboxed to this project, so it's not going to run commands outside of this project. Auto, go ahead and run that. Turbo, always execute these. So I have this on turbo, and I have an allow list. I have a deny list. Don't remove everything. But it seems to still kind of hang up here and not do what I'm telling it to do. So it looks like it's trying to run this still. Maybe we can come in here and stop this and say, please use the REST client from Spring Boot 3.2 and not the web client. All right, so we'll see if that can help it out, nudge it in the right direction. And again, this is where having foundational knowledge of the things that you're working on is really important, and not just kind of accepting whatever code it's writing. Like I understand that I would want to use a REST client here, not a web client, because I'm in the MVC stack. I'm not in a Webflux stack. So it says I have refactored this. Let's go ahead and accept all. We get this REST client. That's not correct. Oh, there it is. Did it do it, or was it asking me to do it? So we get this REST client builder. No, this is not right. All right, so in this configuration, REST client builder, it doesn't like that. But that does look correct. So we should be creating a REST client builder.build that returns, okay, that's why. Okay, let's see if that works. And then we won't need this REST template config anymore, so we can go ahead and delete this. And then we can jump over to our user controller. A couple things here, and again, something like this, silly, but I would put this in my rules, like, hey, if there's only a single constructor, you don't need this at auto-wired annotation. It's going to wire in the user service for me. And then we have all these different endpoints for our CRUD operations. And the user service now is going to use the JSON placeholder service as its base URL. Again, something I would put in my kind of Windsurf rules is anytime we're like hard coding strings in here, that should be turned into some type of config. So I would put that in a config file. We get access to the REST client, and then we use the REST client to get a list of users, get a single user, create a update, delete, etc. So, oops, I want to save that. So far, so good. Let's see, did we do anything in here? No. All right, so now I think I'm in a good place. I want to go ahead and run this application. Let's see if we can't kick this off. So I'm going to go ahead and run public static void main, and it looks like everything is working. And if we do this correctly, we should be able to go over to HTTP localhost 8080/users, which will return a list of users. So let's head back over to the browser and try that. And we see we get our list of users back. And then if we go users1, we'll get a single user back. So things seem to be working pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to add one more feature to our application here. And what I want to do is this user controller, this user service, will reach out to, yeah, we don't need that anymore. This will reach out to the JSON placeholder service. Now that information doesn't change. So maybe I want to add a caching layer here, but I also want to be sure that like I want to log something out when we hit the cache or when we don't, or when we go hit the service so that we know we're hitting the service or the cache. So what I'm going to say is implement a cache for the JSON placeholder service because that information doesn't change much. Log out when we call the JSON placeholder service. And then I'm also going to be very, very specific here. I'm going to say use Spring's built-in cache. We don't need any third-party dependencies, right? So I'm just being very specific. Again, when it comes to prompting, you want to give as much information as possible. We could probably even clean that up, but for sake of brevity here, I'm going to leave that. So the first thing I would expect is we have a user service, we have a cache config. What is the cache config doing? Okay, it's just doing that. So I would have just put this enable caching on the main application class. Whatever, that should be fine because it is a configuration class, so that will work. So now in our service, when we are using the @cacheable annotation, so we are saying go ahead and do that. Now, if some other features of Windsurf, if you wanted to come in here, you can go ahead and chat with this specific line. I could go ahead and say explain this or refactor this, and that way I have that inline capability to like, hey, what is this @cacheable annotation doing here? And then what we're doing here is we are logging this info, so fetching all users from JSON placeholder. That will go ahead and get a list of users. So if we do this the first time, we should see this in the logs. And then if we do it the second time, we won't see this logging command because it is now cached. It is now pulling from the cache. It doesn't need to run this method. So let's see if we can't do this again. So I'm going to go ahead and shut that down. I'll come back to my user application. I'll go ahead and run this. And we'll go back to the browser and I'm going to go ahead and run this once. Actually, let's do this at the user. So users once and then users again and again and again and again. And let's go back over here and see in here. So we fetched user one from JSON placeholder service. We fetched all users from JSON placeholder service. And I only see this log once because every subsequent fetch is from the cache, not from the actual service. So yeah, I think that's it. I just wanted to show the basics of getting started with Windsurf, how to use the IDs, some of the features. Again, I think kind of the real power in this is like making sure that on the projects you're working on, you have those Windsurf rules. You are kind of conforming to your standards, that the way that you like to write things. And it's cool that you can have global rules, you can have workspace rules. It even remembers things. So I didn't think it did it in here, but sometimes as I'm typing and I say like, please favor records for immutability over Java classes when possible, it actually pops something up in the Cascade there and says, hey, do you want me to add this? Or do you want me to remember this thing that we just did? And it'll start to learn with you. So over time it grows, it gets much better. I mean, I'm expecting that. I've only used it a little bit, but I can see where that's going. So yeah, so if you're a Visual Studio Code user, this is a really good agentic IDE solution, a coding tool for you. It's really fast. I love, like, you know, Visual Studio Code has plugins for everything, and you can kind of stylize your editor to whatever preference you want. So again, we're using dark mode here today. I had a nice little theme in there, so you get to kind of personalize your setup. So big fan of Windsurf so far. I haven't used it a ton, but I enjoy how good the code is depending on my prompts and the model you're using, how fast it is, and just how more productive I can be with tools like this. So Again, if you want to get started with Windsurf, go ahead and use the link in the description below to no extra cost to you. Gives me a few credits, help support the channel. That'd be great. But I hope you learned something new today. I had a lot of fun putting this together. I love learning new tools and kind of showing them back to you. So if this is something you'd like me to continue doing, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I hope you had some fun. If you did and you learned something new today, please do me a big favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.